It's my honor to introduce Merced Solis. Merced Solis is a name that might not be known to many people in the athletic arena or celebrity culture, but Tito Santana should ring a bell, especially for fans of the WWF. Tito Santana is the wrestling name for Merced Solis, and tonight we are so delighted to welcome him to the Legacy Project. I'd like to spend just a couple moments to explain a little bit about his remarkable life. I just finished reading his autobiography, and tonight we're going to go into each of these kind of chapters of his life and career. What you may not know, and what we'll go into further detail, is that Merced grew up in Mission, Texas, which is located near the southern border with Mexico and not too far from the Gulf waters. In his new autobiography, titled Don't Call Me Chico, Merced writes about his experiences growing up in a loving family, but one that didn't have a tremendous amount of money. During the harvest season, he would leave school behind and travel around the United States as a migrant farm worker. He'd travel with his family to pick asparagus in Illinois and move on to Wisconsin, Michigan, and then Indiana for the tomato crop. It was a tough life, but one that taught Merced many lessons. From his hometown, he moved on to West Texas University, where he succeeded academically and eventually played for the football team. Recognizing his athletic talent, he continued to see his star rise and actually trained with the Kansas City Chiefs. But something else was in order for his athletic career. He eventually found his way to professional wrestling, working nonstop in regional markets for many years and earning much respect in the industry. His biggest break was when he signed with the Northeast Wrestling promotion, which became known as the WWF, today's WWE. He had an unparalleled run in the WWF. He was crowned international champion and tag team champion. He wrestled at the first 9 WrestleManias, and in his career, he fought alongside the likes of many people he called friends: Andre the Giant, Shawn Michaels, Bret Hart, Greg Valentine, Hulk Hogan, Macho Man Randy Savage. And all of them always said it was with great respect, that it was an honor to fight against Tito Santana. Later in his career, he adopted a new persona known as El Matador, cementing his status as a WWF superstar. In 2004, he was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame. He heard the news of this achievement while living in Morris County, where he has lived for many years with his family. Because even though he has clotheslined and punched his way into stardom, since semi-retiring, Merced has been an elementary school teacher, and he now teaches Spanish in the Roxbury School District. This is a first for us, the first time we have had someone for the Legacy Project who has their own action figure, in fact, multiple action figures. And if you think Merced's wrestling days are behind him, you're wrong. He will step into the ring very soon in New Jersey as well. He continues to wrestle to this day, on the weekends, of course, because he has a commitment Monday through Friday. It is my great honor to welcome Merced Solis, or Tito Santana, to the Legacy Project. Welcome.
Thank you so much, John. You make me sound pretty important. Thank you so much.
So we thought that we'd do a kind of a Q&A with me and you for a while, and then we let some of our attendees ask some questions. But I just read your autobiography, and the first few chapters really struck me. Could you talk a little bit about where you were born? A lot of people on the call might not know that area of Texas.
Well, I was born in Mission, Texas. Everybody knows that Texas is a very big state. It's as far south as you could go. It's 250 miles south of San Antonio. It's 5 miles from the Mexican border, about 60 miles from Bronzeville, Texas, where you find South Padre Island, real close to that. So I grew up and lived there until moved away to go play football at West Texas State in Kenyon, Texas.
You wrote about in the book about, you were kind of born into a family of farmers and that you moved around. What was it like to kind of, work the harvest season with your family?
Well, I started working in the fields from the time that I was 7 years old. It was a hard life. I mean, my dad would take us out in the middle of April. School would end usually the last Friday in May, but we would leave in the middle of April, and we go, like you said, to Illinois or Iowa, and asparagus or Iowa sugar beets later on, and then Sherry's in Wisconsin, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and then we'd go to Indiana. And the first few years, on the way back, we'd leave usually in the middle of October. We'd leave Indiana and we'd stop in Lubbock, Texas, and pick cotton for about 3 or 4 weeks, and then go back and continue school. So my education, I was always behind. I loved school. I was always behind. I loved school for the reason that the only time that I wasn't working on the fields was when I was in school. And I came from a very big family on my mother's side and my father's side. And there was a few of my uncles very few, who had a college education that I could see that they were doing so much better than my parents. And I became interested, and I wanted to, I started thinking about college at a very young age. I was always behind. I mean, my grades were not that great because, I'd miss school at the beginning and at the end of the year. But when I was in school, I worked really hard. I started going full time when I was a freshman in high school. Uh, that's when I started playing football. And my brother and I left Milwaukee, Wisconsin, took a bus, took us about, we spent 2 nights and 3 days on the road on the bus to get back to Mission. And that's when I started playing football. I had never played football. Uh, I don't know why I did it, but my brother was going to do it. It was his first year. He was a junior. So I decided I was going to play. And believe it or not, my sophomore year, our team was ranked second in the state of Texas. So that's pretty good because Texas is known for its football. And I was the only sophomore that made the varsity team. So that was quite an accomplishment. That's when I started realizing, maybe I do have some talent in sports. I started playing basketball. I was the leading scorer in basketball my freshman year. I was the only sophomore that made the varsity team, and I started, and I was the leading scorer my sophomore year in our basketball team. And then I joined track. I ran the 100. I would never win any race, but it was helping me improve my 40. So it was all, I was making a plan for myself to get better and better. And, I would ask the coaches early, my sophomore or junior year, do you think I have a chance? And I would never get an honest answer, and I got 2 offers. We were very good my sophomore year. My junior, our coach left. My junior and senior year, I think we won 4 games both seasons, and there was not a lot of scouts coming around. I had 2 offers, one at San Marcos, Southwest Texas State, and the other one was Amarillo. And I decided to choose Canyon, West Texas State in Canyon, and I got a scholarship. And my dream, I had no idea that I was going to be able to start. I mean, I got there, my first workout, I was fourth string tight end. And the same thing happened. I worked my way up. My sophomore year, I started as a sophomore, and I started sophomore, junior, and senior year. And my career took off. I met a guy by the name of Tully Blanchard. His father was a promoter in San Antonio. And they started talking to me about professional wrestling. And I wasn't interested in wrestling because I wasn't a wrestling fan. I was more interested in my football career. Well, when I signed with the Kansas City Chiefs as a free agent, I should have made it. There were some things that you read in the book that, why I got hurt. I was not able to run a good 40, and my time was not good. I got cut after spending 10 weeks with the Kansas City Chiefs. And then I went to Canada and played in Canada. Then I decided I'm going to give professional wrestling a try. And I told Tully after my Kansas City year, I said I want to play one more year because I had signed with BC Lions for the following year, and that's what I did. I went and played with the BC Lions. I came back and I started training in Florida to be a professional wrestler, and that was the beginning of my wrestling career.
You know, a lot of people who might not know professional wrestling might not know the scene back then in the 70s with these regional promotions. What was it like kind of going from market to market?
Well, back then I started in 1977, and the territories were very small. You know, you didn't have international television. Uh, it was just the local markets, the local TVs. And if you would spend 1 year in an organization, that was usually a pretty good run. Then you'd go to another organization. So I was in Florida. I trained for about 4 months. Then I went to Georgia, and I spent about a year in Georgia. And then I went to Charlotte, North Carolina. And I don't know if you guys, most of you guys should know who, if you are wrestling fans, Ricky Steamboat was a big, big star in Charlotte, North Carolina. And I went to the place that he was at, and I was there for about a year. And then I went to Japan and wrestled in Japan for 6 weeks. And then I came back to Texas, and I was there in Texas for 2.5 months, and I wasn't treated very well. And uh, I told Andre the Giant that I wasn't treated very well, and unbeknown to my, I had become friends with Andre the Giant. Andre the Giant took a video of a match of mine and brought it to Vince McMahon Sr., the owner of the WWF, and before you know it, I was on my way to New York. You know, and before you know it, I'm a guy from Mission, population 14,000 people, wrestling in Madison Square Garden. I mean, that was a dream come true.
I'm curious, how did you get your stage name? And if I have it right, or wrestling name, you had several names that you wrestled under in the early years, right?
Well, I started out as my real name, Merced Solis, which wasn't very catchy. You know, then when I went to Charlotte, they changed my name to Richard Blood, which was Ricky Steamboat's real name, because Ricky Steamboat was in Atlanta for as Richard Blood, and then he left and went to Charlotte, and because the promoter had lost a big guy that became a big star somewhere else, he figured if I took his name, he could create a, you know, Richard Blood star. So I was Richard Blood for 2 years. Then I went back to Amarillo because it was near Canyon where I played football as Merced Solis again. And then when I came to New York, Vince Sr. says, I want you to think of a catchy name. So there was a guy, last name was Santana in my hometown Mission. And I always liked that name. So I told Vince, I like Santana. So my very first match, he says, okay, you're going to be Tino, Tino, Santana. I went and I wrestled my first TV taping as Tino Santana. I signed a few autographs. When I got done with my match, Vince McMahon Sr. and Vince Jr., who is the guy that runs the WWE now, they were waiting for me. When I went through the curtains, they said, from now on, you're going to be Tito Santana. And I said, I don't care what you call me. You know, I'm just happy that you're giving me an opportunity to wrestle here in the WWF. And that's how Tito Santana was born.
I'm curious the backstory for Tito Santana. They said that he was born in Mexico, and they kind of had this backstory for you too. Were you okay with that? Did you get to write any of that backstory?
Well, Vince Sr. says, we're going to push you as a Mexican star. I want you to, we're going to bill you from Mexico. And he said, think of a city in Mexico that we can use. So I just opened the map and I looked right in the center and I saw a town by the name of Toluca, Mexico. So when I told him, okay, it's Toluca, Mexico. So whenever I would be introduced in Madison Square Garden by Howard Finkel, most of you guys know who Howard Finkel is. He couldn't say Toluca, Mexico. He kept saying Tacula, Mexico. And I'd say, Howard, it's Toluca. And then the next time he would introduce me as Tacula. And I said, Howard, it's Toluca. Finally, I said, okay, Howard, it's Tacula, Mexico. So that's how it became Tacula, Mexico. So people from the Mexican fans from Texas and California that would come, they would come up to me and they would ask me, where's Tacula, Mexico? We've never heard of it. And I said, so it was supposed to have been Toluca, but Howard Finkel couldn't pronounce it. So that's why it became Tacula.
You were and continue to be a source of pride for all wrestling fans, but in particular for Mexican and Mexican-American wrestling fans. And you really, I think, were a trailblazer for many people to come after you. Did you recognize the sort of history in the making that you were doing in your career?
No, back then it was so competitive, and you know, I realized at a very early on in my career, there was some Mexican stars like Lothario in Texas and Chavo Guerrero, and they saw me as a threat coming up, which I believe that I ended up having a better success than any of those guys. So they weren't, they didn't offer any help towards me. But then when my career, I had such a great career, and I guess a pretty clean career without much negativity in my life. When Eddie Guerrero and I got inducted into the Hall of Fame, when Eddie Guerrero, he was the world champion at the time for the WWE. Sorry about the phone.
No.
When Eddie Guerrero saw me, he came, and I had met Eddie when he was younger. He came up to me and he said, I want to thank you for opening the doors up for the Mexicans, you know, in the WWF. He says, you were the one who opened the doors up for all of us, he said.
I'm curious, you mentioned kind of that you've led a positive life. You really were grounded in the book, you said, with your family and saving your money. But a lot of your friends and colleagues didn't have that as well. What was it about just kind of keeping, you know, everything positive and trying your best to have a really long career?
Well, I think being a migrant worker, I remember working in the fields for $1 an hour. So I realized how hard it was to earn a living, how hard it was to get out of, you know, coming from a poor family. We lived in a house that my living room here is bigger than my whole house was when I grew up. I appreciated making a buck, and I just couldn't see how, you know, it was so easy to get involved with drugs and party like there's no tomorrow. And I just couldn't see. I'd look around and I'd see how the guys were just blowing money right and left. And I would think that's taking money away from your family, you know, from your kids. Because I didn't squander my money, I was able to help, you know, my family, you know, in Texas also. So family was very important to me.
How did you land in Morris County, New Jersey? How did you, you know, from coming from Texas, was it the New York connection with WWF?
No, it wasn't the New York connection. It was my wife is from Lake Parsippany. So I met my wife. As a matter of fact, my wife was living in Hawaii and she came to visit in 1979. And I just happened to meet her in a bar. I was living in Lake Hiawatha, and there was a bar there. Me and another wrestler, I went in there twice in the year that I was living in. And the second time was just happened to, she walked in, she was on vacation. She came from Hawaii to visit her family. And uh, one thing left to another. She felt comfortable with me because when she was in high school, the guy that helped me come to New York, his father was a professional wrestler, and he Mario Savoldi, the last name was the real last name was Fernini. They live also in Parsippany, and my wife, when she was in high school, used to work for him. So I guess she says, if he is friends with this family, because she liked the family, she goes, he must be okay.
There's so many accomplishments that you had at WWF. One of the coolest things is that you fought in the first match of the first WrestleMania. No one else really can say that except the person you fought against. What was going through your mind? That was at Madison Square Garden, right?
Yes. I don't know if you guys remember WrestleMania 1. That was going to be a make or break pay-per-view event for Vince McMahon. And me and Greg Valentine had the longest feud in the history of the WWF. I mean, we were selling out big buildings without Hulk Hogan on the card. And in the past, Hulk Hogan was the one that would sell out everything. So the people got so involved with our feud that we were selling out and doing great business. So when WrestleMania comes around, that I find out that I'm on the opening match. To me, opening match was preliminary, and I was really torn. I didn't say nothing to anybody, but I was pretty upset and disappointed. And then, okay, it was a job. I'm gonna go out there. I'm in the curtain. I'm gonna go out there and do the best job I can. And Vince, the guy that owns the company now, who took over after his father, comes up to me and he says, Tito, the reason you are on the opening match is because I need somebody to get the people off their asses, if I can say that on the air.
We're college. You're good.
So he says, that's your job. And it was like a minute before I went through the curtain. So I don't know if he timed it, for a reason, but that gave me a different perspective. And to me, I was a ringmaster. I knew exactly what I was doing, and I knew exactly how to get the fans involved. I knew exactly how to get it over, how to get the match over, and it gave me a different perspective. And I went out there and took a little pride on being the first match, and I didn't realize how important the first match of WrestleMania one has become in my career. It's a question that is asked many times to different fans. Who was the first wrestler in WrestleMania one? And Tito Santana. And I did my job. I went out and got the people. What I did what Vince wanted me to do, and then later on, Valentine wrestled Junkyard Dog in about the middle of the card, and I went in and I had a part of that match, so they got me involved later on to put some more fuel to our feud, because we just kept on going with our feud. We wrestled each other for about a year and a half, and at the time, people didn't realize, but we were wrestling all over the world. I mean, I could wrestle in Japan, come back and wrestle in LA, go back and wrestle in New York, and we were having the same match every night, and we wrestled each other for about a year and a half. I mean, that was the longest feud in the history of the WWF, and the people just kept wanting more and more. We'd go back and we sell out again, and we had all kinds of gimmick matches. We had tape fist matches, we had lumberjack matches, we had a curfew match because we went over the curfew in Madison Square Garden. We came back with a no curfew match, no disqualifications, no countouts. I mean, we just had all kinds of gimmick matches that the people would just eat up. And finally, I beat him in Baltimore in the cage match.
Yeah. Does that go down in your mind as one of the best that you've ever been in, that Baltimore match?
Uh, to me, that's that's the best match. I mean, it was a cage match. Baltimore arena was completely sold out, and the fans were unbelievable. I mean, they had probably about 16,000 people. Madison Square Garden used to put in about 24,000. The fans in Baltimore were louder than the Garden fans because it was a different setup and the acoustics were better.
Mhm.
So the sounds were louder, and it was just the unbelievable feeling.
When you became the Intercontinental Champion, it was as a highlight of your career. Could you let us know what happened to the original belt?
God. Uh, the original belt was a green belt, and whoever was a champion would keep that belt. We didn't keep our own belts. So Greg the Hammer Valentine took the belt away from me in Brantford, Ontario, and he had it for, I think he had it for about 8, 10 months that I chased him, and I finally got it back. Well, in the cage match, when they were going to hand me the belt, Valentine took the belt away from them, and he just continued, and he just busted the belt on the cage match. It was a metal cage match, and he just bent the heck out of the belt, tore some of the leather from the belt. But I was the champion. Eventually, they gave me that. To me, I looked at it as junk. So I got the belt. I raised it up in the air. I took it home. They told me I could keep it because they were going to get me a new one. I have a gym in my house. I had the belt for about 10 years, and I would look at it, and I had it on the floor on one of the corners in my gym. And eventually, I threw it in the garbage because I looked at it as junk. And I mean, that belt is so valuable that I could probably get $50,000 for it right now,
Mm.
uh, if I had it. And if I could kick myself in the butt, I would, But at the time, I would look at it, and it's a beaten up belt. It didn't have any purpose, and I wasn't smart enough uh, to see the future for the belt.
Towards the end of your WWF wrestling career, you had a really awesome change in your character. I was wondering when you became the Matador, El Matador. I know they sent you to actually learn about bullfighting in Mexico. Is that right?
Yes, I went to Tijuana. Vince, uh, I wasn't happy. I had different things. I was Strike Force. We broke up. Uh, they didn't give me a long run with Rick Martel. I was supposed to uh, do something else with somebody else, but it didn't happen. And then I kept telling Vince, I said, Vince, you're not using me to the best of my ability. I can draw some money for you. He says, well, I'm not done with you. I've got one more thing. I want you to become El Matador, but I'm going to send you to Mexico. We flew into San Diego, and we booked a hotel, and Vince rented the whole arena. So I trained to become a bullfighter. They had some trainers there, and I actually participated in a bullfight, not with the big bulls. They made it look like he was a big bull, when they did the vignettes, but he was a smaller bull. But I did learn the traits of becoming a matador. They gave me the gimmick, and he made me a promise. I was going to come out. I was supposed to have a big feud with the $1 million man, Ted DiBiase. Ted DiBiase and I and Tully Blanchard played football for West Texas State at the same time. And he was over, the $1 million man was over pretty big in WWF. We were supposed to have a big feud. Well, they X'd out the feud, and they left me hanging, and they never did anything else. And after a while, I just wasn't happy anymore. And, I gave my notice, and I had been on the road for 17 years. And I mean, we used to travel we're on the road 350 days a year. It was horrible missing birthday from my kids and my wife, and celebrate all kinds of celebrations. And I was always gone. Thanksgiving, we were entertaining. I was never home. We'd have matches Thanksgiving. We'd have matches New Year's. We'd have matches Christmas night. I mean, while other people were celebrating, we were entertaining, you know, and it was not a good life. It was, I don't know if I could do it over again. If I had to do it all over again, knowing what I went through, I don't know that I would do it again.
Your book is called "Don't Call Me Chico," which is a reference to some of the jokes or discrimination that you've also faced in your career too. Was that? Could you describe a little bit of that? Were you always accepted as well in different markets and just in your own career?
Yeah, I was. I think that the athlete, that you don't see much discrimination between Mexicans and blacks and whites and Asians. We accept each other. Athletes do. You know, we're brothers. Jesse the Body Ventura was a great performer, and then he became a commentator, and he was over so big. So whenever he would call me Chico, I didn't know that he was calling me Chico because I was always traveling, and I didn't watch our wrestling shows because we were always on the road. But I'd get to the arenas, and the wrestling fans would go, "Hey, Chico," you know, and they'd give me a fist pump, and I would kind of, I would think that they were being disrespectful and not nice when they were calling me Chico. And then I was watching the show on Saturday, and I saw Jesse the Body calling me Chico when he was doing the commentating, and I said, no wonder the fans are calling me Chico. And then I had a different perspective. So that's where the title of that Jesse the Body Ventura was the one that started calling me Chico, and you know, that's where the title "Don't Call Me Chico" came from.
When did you decide that when you left wrestling in a full-time capacity? I know you've never really left, but when did you decide that you wanted to become a teacher?
Well, I decided I wanted to become a teacher when I was in college. I got my teaching degree when I was playing football. When I believe that it was my 8th grade coach who influenced me and got me. He started talking to me about becoming a football player in 8th grade, and I didn't want to do it because I had never played. And he says, "I think you can play." So then the following year, my brother was going to play, and I just went with my brother, hoping that somebody would ask me to see if I wanted to be a football player. And I happened to run into the coach, and he happened to be walking with a freshman coach, and he introduced me to the freshman coach, and he told the freshman coach, "If you can talk this guy into being going out for football, I know that he could be a good football player." So the freshman coach asked me, "Do you want to be a football? You want to play football, son?" And I said, "Yeah." He says, "Show up at 7 o'clock in the morning, and I'll give you a uniform." So the next morning, I was there at 6:30, waiting, you know, for the doors to open up so I could get my uniform. And the guys went out before I did. I stayed in the locker room. I had no idea how to put the pads, my thigh pads. I put them in backwards, and the guys were laughing at me when I came back, you know, and they realized that I had my pants on backwards. So I wanted to be a coach because that 8th grade coach was a big influence in my life. And I said, I want to do the same thing to somebody in the future. And when I stopped wrestling, my wife knew that I had my degree. I already had my degree. I graduated in 4 years. And she goes, "Why don't you go into teaching?" So it took me a couple of years. Finally, I went out and I started subbing to see if I was going to like it. And I liked it. And then I applied for a full-time job. And I've been teaching. This is my 24th year. I want to do 2 more years. And more than likely probably going to retire in 2 more years.
I'm curious if some of the physicality, the difficult kind of just grind of being a wrestler. I mean, how difficult was it in the time and even now, just kind of dealing with all of those injuries and all of that life?
Oh, I mean, back then, if we didn't wrestle, we didn't get paid. Now the guys have contracts. You know, something happens. Look at the baseball players. They break a fingernail. They take some time off. Same thing with wrestlers. You know, there's an injury. They take some time off. If we didn't wrestle, we didn't get paid. Uh, I remember in St. Louis, I wrestled Mr. Wonderful. I had pneumonia, and I went in there and I wrestled and jumping Jim Bronzell. You know, I was sweating like like you wouldn't believe. And he says, "Go home, get you a whiskey shot, Cutty Shark, because I didn't drink liquor." He says, "And get you a hot soup and put on your warm-ups and put on as many blankets over yourself as you can, and you're going to sweat it out. You're going to sweat the fever out." And that's what I did. I woke up in the morning and my bed was soaking wet. My everything was soaking wet, but I sweated I felt good when I woke up in the morning. I sweated out the fever.
We're going to let some folks ask some questions in a second, but I'm going to keep going just a couple more. I'm curious, do I have it right that you're going to wrestle this weekend in New Jersey? And what's it like to be wrestling now?
Well, I'm 67 years old. I stay in pretty good shape, but I don't do anywhere near as much as I used to. I'm not going to risk getting injured. I think the fans just enjoy seeing me having the ability to get into the ring. But I still do like to. I'm still pretty quick for an old man. I can do arm drags. I can do pretty much anything in the ring. I do a couple of spots, and the fans go crazy. They start chanting, "You still got it," and I just lead them into it. But in my mind, I'm saying, "You have no idea. I don't," because I can't do what I used to. I mean, I was good. I think I introduced the flying part of wrestling in New York before there was the big man territory. I was the first one to start doing flying net scissors, drop kicks, stuff in the air, the flying forearm, and they want me to do the flying forearm, but every time you land on the flying forearm, your body just takes a big whiplash on your back, and I can't, my body can't take it anymore. I'm sore for days, and I'm not going to risk my health. The I know the business. The fans are just happy to see me go out there. I'm in a 6-man, thank God. The other guys are younger than me, so they're going to do most of the work, and I'm just going to make my little appearance and get the cheers from my fans, and and that's it. Because I'll get more cheers than the other guys will, because I'm the oldest guy there. It's easy for me to get sympathy.
Well, we have some questions from the community members and students. Amanda has a question. Who was the toughest opponent you've ever been in a match with? The toughest opponent?
Well, the toughest opponent, believe it or not, I was friends with Andre the Giant, but I wrestled Andre the Giant against Andre the Giant. I mean, it doesn't get any tougher than that. Guy was 7'4", I think he weighed close to 500 pounds. And, if he wanted to eat you, he'd eat you, he was tough. But in that era, there was so many tough wrestlers. I mean, guys that were unbelievable. If you ask me who the toughest guy in the business when I was there, King Haku was the toughest guy. Nobody would mess with him.
This one comes from Riley. Do you stay in touch with any of the opponents that you had matches with? Are you still friends with some of the old guys?
Well, wrestling was like a fraternity. We'd go in there, we'd compete. After the match was over, Sometimes you'd have fights that would carry on into the locker rooms, but it's still a fraternity. You know, anybody who has a real brother, you fought with your brother, you fought with your sisters, and it didn't mean that it was the end of a relationship. So we do, we all of us do appearances now. You know, the second opportunity for us, we go and we make appearances, and people want to take pictures with us. People want to buy 8x10s from us, and you know, we get booked to do appearances, you know, from time to time, and we all get together and we all sit around and you know and laugh after the events, and you know, but everybody's so busy with their lives, and so many of my friends are not around anymore. So many of my friends have passed. That's kind of sad, but a lot of them didn't take care of themselves, and they're gone.
The next question we have is from Naomi. Did you ever get hurt really badly? I think there was a knee injury and surgery in the 80s, if I remember.
Yes, that's what initiated that feud with me and Greg the Hammer Valentine. Uh, he tore my knee. I got surgery. The WWF went in the operating room, and I knew for it to be big before I went into the operating room that I went under. I told the photographer, I said, as soon as I wake up, be there with the mic and do the interview, because I wanted to sound real, you know, groggy, you know, still under the drug. And you know, they interviewed me, and it was legit, and people believed it, and people wanted me to get revenge on Greg, you know, and that was one of the injuries. We were always hurt. Our back was hurt. Our knees would get hurt. Our necks would get hurt. Every wrestler has herniated discs on our necks. That's the nature of the business. Like I said, but if we didn't wrestle, we didn't get paid. So we also knew that this was a way to put bread on the bread on the table for our families. So if somebody was hurt, we would take care of them in the ring. You know, just to carry the match. You know, we were so good that we could carry the match. We'd laugh and, you know, we'd say this guy can have a match with a broom, and get the people to cheer for them.
Sophia wanted to know, what was the biggest challenge that you faced in your career?
My biggest challenge, probably my biggest challenge was, I came from South Texas. My English was not that good. I learned English as I went along. So when I first started doing interviews, speaking in front of the camera was the biggest fear that I had. You know, I would break into a sweat, just the fact that I knew I was going to have to step into the camera. But every time you did it, you got better and you got better and you got better. I mean, I would stand in front of the mirror, and I do interviews in front of the mirror, and my English wasn't that good, so I just kept pronouncing the words that I had trouble with, and you know, my English kept getting better and better, because when I left Mission, then I didn't have anybody to speak Spanish to, because when I was in school, the only time I spoke English was in the classroom. The minute I came out, my buddies outside the classroom, we all spoke Spanish, so my English was horrible.
All right, so we got a few more. So lightning round. What is your favorite and worst memories from wrestling? Do you have like one thing that's your best and one thing that's your worst?
Well, probably the worst memory that I can remember is in 1979, when we came to do a TV taping, and we hear that Vince Sr. had cancer and he wasn't supposed to be around much longer. And that's when he gave the company over to, they had a big meeting, and they gave the company over to Vince Jr., who's the guy that runs it now. That was my worst memory. Uh, the best memory was the first time I stepped into Madison Square Garden. I mean, here's a guy that, came from Mission. I said population 14,000. All of a sudden, I get in the ring, and uh, my wife and I went to a concert in Madison Square Garden, and we were in the very top. Those were the best seats that we could get, and we'd look down where the performers. I forget the name of the guy who was a singer, and you could barely see him. And I said, but we had a big monitor where we could see him on the monitor. Well, back then when I was wrestling, you didn't have no monitors. People would go all the way to the top and just wanted to be part of the matches, and they couldn't see much, because the ring looked so small in Madison Square Garden.
Professor Deborah Hofflinger has a question. Did you encourage your sons to wrestle or no?
No, I think when my kids were little, they loved wrestling. I used to wrestle with them, but I told them when they were very little, would you want to be away from your kids as much as I'm away from you guys? And I think that left an impression on them. And my wife wanted them to get a very good education. I have three sons. My eldest son's a lawyer. My middle son graduated from Princeton, and right now he's doing human rights work. He lives in Africa, and my youngest son works for a tech company in New York, and they all got great education. They were my wife's very smart, and the kids are very smart, and I didn't want them to have the life. It wasn't a good life being on the road 350 days a year. It was tough, and you were surrounded with all kinds of problems that you could get into on the road, and I just didn't want them to go through that.
It looks like we have our final three questions. Anissa wanted to know, in Roxbury, where you teach, did you ever think about coaching the wrestling team there?
Well, believe it or not, I teach in the middle school, and the principal loved me, that hired me, and he says, Tito, do you want to coach the wrestling team? Well, I didn't learn how to wrestle amateur wrestling, and I said, sure. I said, I can teach the kids to go like this and like that, like professional wrestlers do. And he started laughing, and he says, what about basketball? I was a good basketball player. And I said, yeah, I'll coach basketball. And I was the basketball coach for 14 years, and I gave it up 2 years ago.
Gareth, I bet Gareth is a wrestling fan. So his question is, with kayfabe no longer being enforced by the talent in the industry, what impact has it had on the business, in your opinion? And could you maybe define that term for those who might not know what that is?
Well, kayfabe, the wrestlers in my era, we used to protect the business. And in my era, the wrestling fan, a big majority of the wrestling fans, they believed that wrestling was totally on the up and up, because it was pretty close to being on the up and up. The only thing we knew going into the match was the finish of the match. The promoter always controlled who he was going to push, who he thought was going to draw money for him. So we would never allow ourselves to be seen by fans, a good guy hanging out with a bad guy. So we protected the business. We didn't travel. The good guy didn't travel with the bad guys. Well, now Vince McMahon totally exposed the business, and they don't protect it. Now everybody knows that it's entertainment, and it's TV entertainment, and it's a different business. Now, but the fans still enjoy it. It's still good entertainment, and I don't think they're doing as good as years past. They're having a hard time creating mega stars like Hogan, like The Rock, like Stone Cold, and you know, a bunch of other wrestlers, you know, that became really big stars. You know, Shawn Michaels, Bret Hart, and you can just go down the line. You know, we're considered legends. You know, all of us were great performers, and we were great. We were like rock and roll stars. Wherever we went, we got recognized, and I mean, they treated us everywhere we went. The hotels, the gyms, the everywhere we went. You know, carte blanche. You know, we got to go in for free. We, you know, everything was really great for us.